Can you lend me money for my graduation fee?" Those trembling words fell from the lips of a poor girl who only wanted to stand beneath the shining lights of her graduation ceremony, unaware she was begging not from a student, not from a passerby, but from a CEO billionaire whose fortune could buy the entire university twice over. The poor girl, desperate and unseen, stood with shaking hands and tear-bitten hope, while the CEO billionaire, dressed like an ordinary man, listened with quiet eyes that held more secrets than she could ever imagine. One request tied their destinies together. One plea separated her dream from failure. One question echoed through the halls of graduation like a heartbeat waiting for an answer. But why would a CEO billionaire sit alone on campus like a forgotten shadow? And why would a poor girl risk humiliation for her graduation fee with just hours left before the ceremony? And what would happen when she discovered the truth that the man she begged was the very CEO billionaire who controlled her future without her knowing? The campus of Westbridge University buzzed like a beehive preparing for honeymaking. Laughter echoed across the quad. Students dressed in semi-formal attire took pictures beside banners that read, "Graduation, a new beginning." Everywhere smelled of accomplishment, freshly cut grass, newly polished auditorium floors, and the nervous hope of students waiting to cross into adulthood. For most, it was a day for celebration. For Mira, it was a race against humiliation. She stood alone in front of the bursar's office, fists clenched around a worn-out document envelope as if it held her future inside. It did. Her academic clearance, thesis approval, final grades, all perfect, all earned. But none of it mattered without the last piece, the graduation fee she didn't have. Mira had spent nights balancing 3 part-time jobs, dishwashing in a cafeteria, tutoring freshmen, and cleaning library halls when everyone else slept. Even then, after rent, food, and tuition installment payments, there was nothing left. She had counted coins, sold her only laptop, even skipped meals, but she was still short. If she didn't pay today, her name would not appear on the graduation lineup. She swallowed down the ache rising in her throat. Not after everything. Not after fighting this hard. Her heels were worn, her backpack patched with mismatched thread, but her eyes, dark, hopeful, stubborn, still carried dreams bigger than her circumstances. She scanned the campus looking for a miracle, though she didn't believe in them. Students everywhere walked with families, flowers, cameras, and joy. Mira walked with nothing but determination and an envelope that felt too light to matter. She approached the office again, hoping by some twist of fate that money would magically appear or that fees would somehow be waived. But reality mocked her. A poster read, "Final cutoff today, 12 p.m. No exceptions." It was 10:15 a.m. The world around her blurred into noise, laughter, footsteps, snapshots of families hugging their graduating children. Her chest tightened. She stepped aside from the doorway and watched life move without her. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to herself, voice thin as paper. She needed help, but shame burned like fire under her ribs. Asking for money was humiliating. She'd rather starve than beg, but today wasn't about pride. Today was her future. So gathering what courage she had left, Mira looked around for anyone she could ask. Professors hurried past, busy. Students laughed in groups. Parents looked too proud and polished to approach, until her eyes caught sight of a man sitting alone, dressed simply in jeans, sneakers, and a faded t-shirt with a coffee stain across the front. He didn't look like faculty, didn't look like a parent either. No camera, no flowers, just a plain cup of coffee and a thoughtful expression, like someone detached from the celebration yet deeply observing it. He looked safe enough. Her heart pounding, she moved toward him slowly, rehearsing words in her head. "Please, don't let this be a mistake. She stopped a step away. Excuse me, sir, she said softly, voice trembling. Can you lend me money for my graduation fee? Silence. Then he raised his head and looked at her. Mira had no idea she had just spoken to a billionaire. For a moment, neither of them moved. Just the poor girl's trembling question suspended in the air between them like a fragile thread that could either snap or save her life. The man lowered his coffee cup slowly, eyes studying her with a calm depth she couldn't decipher. He didn't laugh. He didn't look offended. He didn't look pitying either. Instead, he looked as though he was searching her face for something. Courage, sincerity, truth. What's your name? He asked gently. Mira, she replied, swallowing hard. Mira de la Cruz. He repeated it quietly as if tasting the syllables. Mira, a name like hope, like survival. And how much do you need? She hesitated. The number felt heavy on her tongue. $280. His eyebrow lifted, not judgmental, but surprised she needed so little to stand on a stage that took years to reach. That's everything short, she added quickly, afraid he might misunderstand. I've paid the rest. I just didn't earn enough this month. And there's a deadline, in less than 2 hours. She didn't mention the skipped meals. She didn't mention the nights she studied with numb fingers and burning eyes. She didn't mention hunger, exhaustion, loneliness, or the silent victories no one saw. He heard them anyway. And if I help you, he said quietly, what will you do with your life after graduation? Mira blinked, startled. No one asked that. Everyone expected her to celebrate, then survive. Figure things out later, like she always did, but his question dug deeper, peeling back layers she hid even from herself. I want to design systems to help rural schools access technology, she said, voice gaining strength as she spoke. Affordable, inclusive, scalable tech, so no kid has to drop out because they don't have access to learning tools. I know what it feels like to have dreams, but no money. I don't want others to go through what I went through. The man leaned back slightly, watching her with a gaze that burned, not with pity, but with recognition. He had been that kid once. He remembered empty refrigerators, power outages, and studying under streetlights. He remembered walking to school because bus fare was food money. He remembered begging for chances in rooms full of people who thought poverty meant incompetence. Mira's voice was his past echoing back to him, but she didn't know that. So you're asking a stranger for money, he said after a moment, tone unreadable. Even knowing he could say no? Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes, because losing this chance hurts more than rejection ever will. He nodded slowly, quietly impressed, painfully reminded. Walk with me, he said, standing. Mira froze. Are you agreeing? I said walk, he replied calmly. Not yes, not yet. Confusion tangled with hope, but she followed anyway, across the campus, past laughing graduates and proud families. He moved like someone familiar with sorrow, success, and secrets. She followed like a girl chasing a dream, unaware she was walking beside the very CEO billionaire who could rewrite her entire future with one word. But would he? And what was he really testing? They walked through the university courtyard with no destination stated, but Mira sensed purpose in every step he took. The sun pressed warm gold across the pavement, glinting off graduation caps carried in joyful hands, but she felt the weight of uncertainty heavier than the heat. She matched his pace cautiously, studying him from the corner of her eye. He moved like a man used to observing life rather than participating in it, quiet, composed, unreadable. He didn't have the anxious flutter of a student or the emotional pride of a parent. He looked misplaced among the celebration, yet perfectly anchored in his own silence. The farther they walked, the louder the world around them became. The marching band practicing across the lawn, the chatter of families scoping out seats, the clicking heels of students posing for photos. Everything was loud except him, except them. Finally, he spoke. "How long have you been fighting alone, Mira?" Her breath caught. She hadn't told him she was alone, but the truth must have been written in the frayed straps of her bag, in the exhaustion beneath her eyes, in her voice when she asked a stranger for help. "Since second year," she answered, staring ahead. "My parents lost their jobs. My brother got sick. I became the only one who could earn. If I gave up school, everything we sacrificed would be for nothing." He nodded gently, no shock, no pity, understanding. "And no one offered to help you?" "No one was obligated to," she replied, a faint tremor in her voice. "Help doesn't belong to me. I have to earn it." He stopped walking. Mira halted too, heart racing. He turned to her, expression sharpened with something like emotion, soft but intense. "You asked me for help today," he said. "Was that earning it or was that desperation?" She swallowed hard, meeting his steady gaze. "A little of both." For the first time he smiled, small, genuine, almost invisible but unmistakable. "Good," he murmured, "because courage is often born from desperation, and you were brave enough to ask." They continued walking until they reached a quieter corner of campus, a bench beneath a wide oak tree, shielding them from the noise and celebration. The shade felt like a sanctuary. He gestured for her to sit. She did, hands pressed together anxiously. He sat beside her, elbows on knees, voice low. "Mira, if I lend you this money, you'll graduate," he said. "But if I invest in you, truly invest, you could change more than just your own life." Her breath stopped. "Invest?" "I've seen hundreds of graduates with privilege," he continued. "Comfort, backup plans, safety nets. But you're the type who survives without one. You've built yourself from nothing. You know hunger, you know effort, and you know why education matters." Her pulse thundered in her ears. Why did he speak with such certainty? Why did he see her so clearly? Who was this man? Before she could ask, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple black business card. Sleek, minimal, weighty. He placed it gently in her hand. Mira flipped it over and froze. Printed in silver ink was a name that made her heart lurch. Adrian Cole, CEO, Cole Tech Industries. Her vision blurred, her breath fractured. She had begged a billionaire. Mira's fingers tightened around the business card as if it might disappear if she blinked too long. Adrian Cole. She had seen that name in Forbes lists, in entrepreneurship seminars, on tech magazines displayed behind glass. Untouchable, unreachable, unreal. Yet here he sat, inches away, the billionaire who could have passed unnoticed among students if not for the gravity in his eyes. The world spun, but she held herself still. "You're Adrian Cole," she whispered. He nodded once, not boastfully, almost painfully, as though the wealth people worshipped was only a shadow of the man he had once been. "I came here today to remember who I was before money insulated me," he said softly, "to remind myself of struggle, of hunger, of wanting one more chance than life seemed willing to give." Mira's voice trembled. "And I asked you for money." "You asked for a chance," Adrian corrected. "That is more valuable than money ever will be." Her breath caught, chest swelling with disbelief and trembling hope. He leaned back, hands clasped loosely, as though weighing the future between his palms. "I'll pay your graduation fee," he said, "right now." She gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. But I'm not finished." His voice deepened with quiet authority. "I want you to intern at my company for 6 months. If you work as hard there as you have here, I will sponsor your postgraduate program and help you build the educational system you dream of." Like a door unlocking after years of knocking, Her future widened into light she wasn't prepared to see. Tears blurred her vision. She bowed her head, shoulders shaking, not with weakness, but release. "Why me?" she whispered through trembling lips. "There are thousands of students. Why choose a poor girl who could barely ask for help?" Adrian's answer was soft, steady, unshakable. "Because I once stood exactly where you are standing. Because no one invested in me when I was invisible. Because you remind me of the hunger I never want to forget." He reached into his wallet, counted the exact amount, and pressed it into her hand with quiet finality. "Go," he said. "Pay your fee. Earn your moment." Mira didn't walk. She ran, through crowds, past laughter, tears streaming like a baptism of new beginnings. She burst into the bursar's office, voice cracking as she laid the money down, papers stamped, clearance approved, her name restored to the graduation list, where it always belonged. Later, dressed in borrowed gown and trembling pride, Mira stood among hundreds of graduates. But when Adrian Cole stepped onto the stage as the surprise keynote speaker, their eyes locked across the auditorium like a secret only two souls shared. She had begged a billionaire. He had seen a fighter. A future neither of them expected began with one trembling question. "Can you lend me money for my graduation fee?" And everything that followed changed two lives forever. Rain pattered softly against the tall glass windows of Coltech Tower, 52 floors above the city, where dreams could either take flight or fall. Mira stood with her hands tucked behind her back, wearing an ID badge that didn't just grant her access to a building, but to a life she once thought belonged only to children who were born lucky. She was no longer the poor girl begging for graduation fee. She was Mira Dela Cruz, lead developer, EduLink project. A year had passed since the day she ran across campus, clutching graduation funds in her trembling hands. A year since a billionaire in simple clothes saw past her brokenness and recognized brilliance buried in desperation. The world had changed in quieter ways, but Mira had changed loudly. Across the city, 7 rural schools now used her. Software, low-cost digital libraries, offline learning modules, and real-time tutoring systems for children who lived far from opportunity. Newspapers called it education for the unreachable. Investors called it genius. But Mira never forgot where it began. It began with hunger. It began with struggle. It began with a trembling question, whispered under the weight of failure. "Can you lend me money for my graduation fee?" She smiled at the memory, both painful and beautiful. Every line of her journey was etched with effort. Behind her, footsteps sounded. Adrian Cole stepped into the room with the calm confidence of a man who no longer needed to prove his wealth or his worth. He had grown quieter over the year, not distant, but grounded. Watching Mira flourish reminded him daily why success meant nothing if its ladder was pulled up behind him. He joined her at the window, hands resting in his pockets. "You've done it," he said. "You've built something the world needed." Mira didn't look at him. She kept her gaze on the skyline shimmering beneath storm clouds, like opportunity glinting through hardship. "No," she replied softly. "We did." He nodded, accepting the truth and the partnership it implied. Outside, lightning briefly lit up the sky, and Mira's eyes shone with it. The city below was so wide, so loud, so full of futures waiting to be written. She had no intention of stopping here. "There's more to build," she said. "More students who need a chance." Adrian's smile was small but full of pride, the kind reserved not for prodigies born with silver, but warriors made from steel. "Then let's find them," he replied. "Every Mira who thinks she is invisible." Together they turned from the window, not away from the past, but toward every possibility the future could hold. The billionaire who once hid among crowds now walked beside a woman who had risen from them. and in the quiet hum of servers and rain beyond the glass, a legacy was born, not of wealth, but of chances given and dreams fulfilled.